Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Bass. I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Students and Executive Director of the Public Service Center here at Berkeley. And welcome. We're really excited to welcome you to the very first Possibility Lab's inaugural Conversations with Possibility speaker series. This is co-hosted by the Goldman School of Public Policy, California Volunteers, and the UC Berkeley Public Service Center. Today, Amy Lerman, who is the Michelle Schwartz Endowed Chair, Professor of Policy and Political Science and Executive Director of the Possibility Lab, and I would really recommend that you take a look at their website. The stuff they're doing here is extraordinary, really. And Josh Fryday, Chief Service Officer for the State of California and Executive Director of California Volunteers. Thank you. And they'll be engaging us in conversation about how new models for service and civic engagement can be replicated and scaled to improve communities and grow a new generation of civic leaders. Also, please note we are live streaming and taking photographs throughout the event. So now it is really my pleasure to introduce Josh Fryday. I first met Josh maybe like 3 or 4 years ago when this was just an idea, and it's really exciting not only to see it become real, but to be a part of it. So thank you, Josh. Josh Fryday serves as California's Chief Service Officer and is a member of the Governor's Cabinet. Through his leadership of California Volunteers, the state office tasked with engaging Californians in civic engagement, he leads service, volunteer, and civic engagement efforts throughout the state. These include Youth Jobs Corps, an initiative that partners with local governments and community-based organizations to employ low-income, former foster, justice-involved, and unemployed youth. Climate Action Corps, the nation's first state-level climate service corps. And a program near and dear to my heart, College Corps, a statewide service program that creates debt-free pathways to college while engaging students across the state and solving problems in their local communities. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment. Prior to being appointed Chief Service Officer, Josh was the mayor of Novato, his hometown. He also served as president of the Golden State Opportunity, leading the expansion and implementation of the California Earned Income Tax Credit, as Chief Operating Officer for Next Gen Climate, a national organization focused on climate change, and served as an officer and a member of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, or JAG, in the U.S. Navy. He's also a founding board member of Amazon Frontlines, a leading organization to protect indigenous communities and territories in the Amazon, and is an emeritus board member for Demos, a national think tank focused on issues of economic, racial, and political inequality. And he's also a very proud Berkeley alum.
The most important part.
Most important part. Getting both his BA and his JD here.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
So, as I mentioned, I direct the Public Service Center, and I wanted to share a little bit about College Corps because we do manage that program on campus. And College Corps is a statewide initiative that provides thousands of students across the state at UC, Cal State, community college, and private universities with opportunities to serve in organizations addressing the greatest needs of their communities while helping those students graduate from college on time with less debt. Students complete 450 hours of service and in return receive $10,000 in stipends and educational grants. So this year we have just over 100 students participating in College Corps at Berkeley. 90% are from historically underrepresented communities, 73% are first-generation college students, 33% are transfer students, and 9% are dreamers. With each student completing 450 hours of service, that means 450,000 hours of service are being completed. 45,000 hours of service are being completed. Not only is College Corps supporting students with significant demonstrated need and assisting our local communities in meeting their missions, in working closely with these students, I've had the privilege of seeing just how much this program means to them and how it improves their educational experience and sense of connection and community. We at Cal organize our students into small units or pods where they're led through a curriculum and in conversation with PSC staff members. Some of the staff members and students are here today. But let me read what one student who served as a mentor and tutor in one of our local elementary schools wrote about her College Corps experience. She said, College Corps has allowed me to connect with so many fellows, even at other campuses, and it has also helped me connect with the Berkeley community and discover my passion for educational equity. Whenever Cal became overwhelming, I would show up to serve and feel so refreshed and full of energy after spending time with my students. It was also extremely rewarding to be able to create lifelong friendships with fellows in my pod and to feel more connected to Cal. Most importantly, it showed me the strength and solidarity that comes with community building. And this is a story we hear over and over again from many of our College Corps students. And I think what's great about this program is it gives students an opportunity to be in meaningful, sustained conversations with their fellow students at a time, in all frankness, in our political moment, that's very much needed. And so I really want to just say thank you to Josh and the governor for making that possible. And so with that, I will just hand it off to you, Amy.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Josh, for coming. We're really excited about this conversation and about the launch of our Conversations with Interesting People, which was the title I felt like would be the right title for this. So I want to start with just where the idea for this work comes from, and sort of how you came to this work.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back on campus. It's so fun to be here, and for being part of the Possibility Lab. I love the title because what underlies that is hope, the conversation about what's possible with policy and government. And that's really what brought me into this work, to wanting to go into public service, which is how do we create a more hopeful world? How do we create a more just world? How do we create change in our societies? And my journey began where many or most or all great things began here on campus as a student, where I had a chance to serve in student government. I had a chance to be involved here on campus. And I took the tools that my professors, some of which are here today, gave me, and the education that they gave me, and decided that I wanted to use that to go out and make a difference in the world. And so I had a chance right after school to go and work on my first presidential campaign. And then I had a chance later on in life to, because I wanted to be a part of what the country was and the world was dealing with after 9/11, join the Navy and serve in the United States Navy. And then come home and serve as well, both at my local city council and as mayor, but in running organizations. And I think for me, and the reason that I'm sitting here today having this conversation is that service was for me a way to change the world. That every time I've had a chance to serve and be involved in something, it was empowering. It gave me a sense that I can actually have an impact on issues that can sometimes seem so paralyzing or so big. When I served, I actually felt hopeful. I felt like something was possible. And then selfishly, it's also where I felt the happiest. It's when I've served, it's when I felt the most connected to my community, to the people around me. My best friends in life are those who I served with here at the ASUC on campus and served in the Navy. Building those relationships, it's where I felt the most valued as a human being when I served. So when through those experiences, I really started to think about, seriously, along with many others, about what if we lived in a society where everyone got to experience that? Where everyone, because they had the ability to make an impact in their community, to contribute, to co-create the environment around them through service, felt like they belonged and were respected and recognized and valued. And what would our world look like? What would our country look like? What would our communities look like if everyone had that opportunity? And fortunately, we have a governor who believes very much in that vision, and so that's why I'm sitting here today.
That's great, thank you. And I wonder if you'll talk a little bit, so one of the really interesting things is all of these different pathways to service that you've created. And I wonder if you'd talk about how you see them fitting together, the sort of climate piece and the sort of the core that we have on campus, and where the pieces came from.
Sure. So I think when we think about service and broader civic engagement, we think about it on a couple levels. One is we have to, as government always should, we want to help people. We want to create opportunity for people. And so our programs, as was discussed, our College Corps program, which creates debt-free pathways to college, is recognizing that we have a student debt crisis in this country. We all know. We also know that our student debt crisis disproportionately impacts our black and brown youth. And so we knew that we had a crisis that we had to try to address and deal with. And we also wanted to create opportunities for our young people. We also know that through service, we have a chance to tackle our biggest challenges as a society. If we can actually mobilize and take advantage of really what we think is our most powerful asset here in California, and that's our 40 million people that call this place home. And so when we think about things like climate change, when we think about things like education disparities and the need for high-dosage tutoring in schools, when we think about things like growing inequality and food insecurity, the ability to really harness the power of our people is something that really motivated us. And then, of course, we also understand how divided our society is and how isolated and lonely people feel. And so when we thought about service and we thought about our College Corps program that could help college students, a Climate Corps program that could help us be on the front lines of tackling climate and organizing around climate change, and our Youth Jobs program that was providing real service opportunities and job pathways for our low-income youth and our formerly incarcerated youth, our foster transitioning youth. When we thought about what was possible across that whole spectrum of individuals, community impact, and then societal impact, it just made sense to us to create these programs.
And so one of the things that we talk a lot about is sort of how you go from ideas to implementation. And I think that the thing that's so remarkable about the successes you've had are how quickly you were able to take this sort of incredible idea and turn it into something that is, I think, really central to the spirit of the state. So will you just talk us through what that looked like, what kind of challenges there were, or sort of how you got this idea off the ground?
Yeah, a lot of coffee. So start with that. Yeah, I mean, we'd like to think that every great idea becomes a real government program, right? We know that that's not true. And we also know that there's a lot of great ideas that don't get off the ground. So we do feel very fortunate. We're very proud of what we've built at California Volunteers over the last few years. I think a couple lessons. One is, and maybe this is the most obvious, elections matter. So we have a governor who happens to be very, very committed and passionate about this issue and committed to put the resources behind making it possible. So it starts with having leaders that are committed to it. That's I would say, first and foremost. I also think from our experience, it's so critical to have a proof of concept that has the ability to scale. So we'll just take our College Corps program because we're here on campus where we have College Corps. Our College Corps program, the idea for it really started in this great city of Novato, where I got the chance to serve as mayor, and we created a program that provided essentially free education with our local college for Novato students who were committed to serving during the summers with the city. So if you served your summer and you got into our local college, you basically got a free ride. And that was a program that we created. And it was a very, very small program, but it was very impactful. And so we took that idea, and when I started this position at California Volunteers, we then scaled it to 8 other campuses across the state of California that had 250 students. And we spent a year and a half really developing the program, testing, designing it, seeing what worked, what didn't. And then from that program of 250, that's now become a program of 3,500 in College Corps at 46 campuses across the state. And so at each step of the way, we had to prove the concept of the idea. And then in terms of opportunities, you have to be ready for things you just don't expect. We did not expect a global pandemic to shut government down and change how we viewed everything that we did on a daily basis. In some ways, though, it presented an opportunity for these service programs. And I'll give one example. I was put in charge by the governor of our food task force to keep our food banks operational because as soon as we put in the stay-at-home orders, our volunteer population, which food banks rely on in order to stay operational, fell off completely. At the same time, food insecurity skyrocketed. And we all remember the lines around the food banks. It became apparent overnight, literally overnight, how important and valuable volunteers and service members are to critical things like our food banks. So we took that opportunity to demonstrate the value of service, of volunteering, to show, and this is probably the most important lesson that we've learned in terms of taking an idea and implementing it, you have to demonstrate the value of your idea to a whole lot of stakeholders, a lot of different people. And it's while it's critical to have, the governor's support on the idea, that's the most critical. There's a lot of other things that have to come into place. He has a whole team, or she has a whole team around them of advisors that you have to try to bring on board, and you have to try to find partners. And so we were able to work with other agencies where they saw the value in our work too, and it was finding those partners that became absolutely critical. I do remember a critical moment in the beginning of COVID where the press secretary for the governor, a guy named Jesse Melgar, gave us the opportunity to launch a program, and because he understood the governor's vision and he understood how passionate the governor was about this work, he created the opportunity for us to spread the word to the entire state of California about how important it was for people to volunteer. And so it took finding those allies within government to be able to get things off the ground as quickly as we did.
And what kind of challenges did you run into, or pushback? Even if it's just, there's lots of priorities in the state and it's hard to get your kind of priority on the table.
I mean, I think that's it. I think for like any good idea, there's a couple of things that people are just going to be against ideologically or for whatever reason. For our example, for something like service and volunteerism, it sounds like apple pie and ice cream, right? It's like, who's going to be against service and volunteerism? So it wasn't a matter of people being against it. It's a question of, and this is what politics is. This is what I learned at Berkeley, I think in some class along the way, right? Politics is basically the allocation of resources. Who gets what resources? How much do they get? How do they get it? How are those resources divvied up and delivered? And so the challenge becomes finding the stakeholders, which in government are your elected leaders, so not just the governor, but you have also 120 legislators that you need to try to bring on board. And you have a lot of agencies who have a lot of funding. There's the federal government. Some of our early programs that we launched with federal funding, which was an opportunity we weren't expecting, but then you have to convince them. So it's really about it is about prioritization to a large extent, which means we had to, and I think you have to really show the value to the different stakeholders, because there's a lot of different things coming in. And so that was a critical part of what we did from the get-go.
And when you think about value, like how do you articulate the different places that this program provides value at the individual, volunteer level, at the community organizations they're volunteering with? Where do you see the impact?
I'm glad you asked that question, Amy.
I love a good question about impact.
Because service is a win-win-win. We think about the impact, I think, in three main buckets. One is it's the impact on the individual. So it's everything around creating actual economic opportunity for the individual. It's giving individuals the experience of serving. We heard some quotes from some of our College Board members about what that does in terms of creating connection and value and confidence. And so we know the individual impact. We also know the communal impact. Last year, our College Board program did over 1 million hours of service across the state of California. That's 1 million hours of service of tutoring, mentoring in our low-income schools, working in our food banks, planting community gardens and trees up and down the state. Real meaningful work. So we see the value there. And then we also think about the value in terms of, with these programs, we're really creating the future workforce of California. So many of you know we have a massive teacher shortage in the state of California, over 10,000 positions that go unfilled or are filled by those who are not properly trained, fully trained to be in the classroom. And so what we see from our programs, and this is part of the demonstrating value and finding stakeholders like the unions and other teaching groups and school superintendents, is to show that if you can do one of our programs and you get exposed to the classroom at a young age, that actually can set you on a career into the profession of teaching. And so it's finding those wins along the way that have been critical for us.
I wonder too, I love the focus on college students and young people. I think it's such an extraordinary way to socialize people into the idea of service. But I wonder, just asking for a friend. If you've, if you've thought about sort of other populations that you could tap into, whether it's faculty or adults who are taking kind of a sabbatical year, or what other places you see where you could build out service.
Yeah, so it's a great question, because we have focused on young people, which makes up many of our service programs. But the truth is, our vision for California for really creating a culture service, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, is to provide the opportunity for everybody to serve. And when we say everybody, we literally mean everybody, which is why it was so important that with our College Corps program, we created it to include for the very first time our AB 540 Dreamers in a service program. It's also why for our Climate Corps program, for instance, one of the main activities of our Climate Corps members is to do these community climate action days around the state of California, where we've already engaged tens of thousands of community volunteers. And we just had one recently on MLK Day down the street in Richmond. We had over 800 volunteers come together. And Amy, it was the majority of the people were kids and seniors. And it was beautiful. And people from all different backgrounds and speaking many different languages. And it's creating those kinds of opportunities, I think, that provides an invitation to everybody, no matter what age you are, no matter what background you are, to be part of creating a community. And I think that's what people are so thirsty for right now in our society. And that's why, I think that's why we've seen a lot of the success of our programs.
It's incredible. I also wonder what role sort of the relationship with local governments plays here. You talked a little bit about federal funding and sort of seeding the project there, but I wonder what relationship sort of your office has with local government.
Yeah, a very close relationship. It's critical. Local government plays a critical role. One is, and I gave the example of when I was mayor and incubating the idea of paying for college through service. So it's a place of innovation. You can innovate and be nimble and test things really quickly at the local level that then you can scale statewide or federally. But it's also local government plays a critical role because they're actually on the ground. And so they know who the right nonprofits are that we should be working with. They know who the right groups we should be connecting with. And so we've been very intentional about making sure that, for instance, our Youth Jobs Corps program is a direct partnership with mayors up and down the state of California. And so, for instance, so we fund cities to then work with hiring literally thousands of low-income youth and underserved youth around the state to have a service experience, to have a job, to have wraparound services. That's a partnership with us and mayors across the state. And back to the political question, I think, of how do you actually then get things so that they not just are implemented, but then become sustainable. I think because of that partnership, because of the impact that the mayors saw of these programs in their community, last year the Big 13 mayors, which is a very influential group of mayors in the state, of Big 13 cities, wrote a letter and made their top priority for the entire state budget around two issues. One was homelessness, which shouldn't surprise any of us. And the second was supporting our Youth Jobs Corps that California Volunteers runs. And so that's how that played a huge role in us getting last year's sustainable funding for the Youth Jobs Corps program. So our partnerships with local governments have been absolutely critical.
That is amazing. And so tell me a little bit about where you see the program going in terms of scaling it within California, scaling it across the country, growing it. What are the goals for the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
I think our goal, you said it, I think our goal is to scale. We have a vision where we create a California, a society where everyone understands that they have something to contribute. And we're going to create the opportunity for them to actually be able to do that. And so we've created right now, through these programs that we've talked about, through our Climate Corps program, our College Corps, our Jobs Corps, and our AmeriCorps programs, we've created now a force, a service force that is literally in California larger than the entire Peace Corps. And that's something that the governor and we are all very proud of. We need to keep scaling that. So we want College Corps to be on all campuses. We want to have Climate Corps in every community. So we're going to keep scaling those. We also know that that we need to engage more than just those who can serve for a year and get paid for it. So we're creating some of the climate opportunities I talked about, where we're engaging tens of thousands. We hope that in the coming years, that's hundreds of thousands of volunteers. And then ultimately, we need to get to a place where we're engaging millions of Californians. So soon we're going to be launching a neighbor-to-neighbor initiative that's going to be calling on all Californians and investing in communities for people to come together at the neighborhood level, for neighbors to get to know each other, to work together, to take climate action together. So we're going to keep scaling and keep going bigger.
And how can people get involved in supporting this effort? Obviously applying to one of the programs, but for people in the room who are really excited about this and would like to be supportive, what can we do for you?
There's lots you can do for me.
Excellent.
First, go visit our website, californiavolunteers.ca.gov, and learn about all of our materials. But here's how we feel, and I appreciate that question so much, because here's how we really feel about this. To create a culture of service in California, we need everybody. We literally need everybody. And that requires so many partnerships, and that requires public-private partnerships, it requires partnerships with universities, it requires partnerships with nonprofits, with business leaders, with faith leaders. This is a full hands-on-deck moment that we feel like we're in. And so we need you all to be part of this, to help us make sure that communities across the state understand that these programs exist, to volunteer yourself to be part of our Climate Action Day, to be a model for your community, to be part of our neighbor-to-neighbor program when we launch that, to sign up and be a neighborhood leader. There's a lot of ways to get involved directly, but I think one of the things, and especially here on a campus we can talk about, is we need to send the message, I think, to everyone, and especially to the next generation, that for a democracy to work, and for us to actually tackle the challenges ahead of us, people have to serve. They have to. It's the only way this works. And unless we as professors and business leaders and public service leaders and elected officials are willing to say that, guess what? People aren't going to get that message. So we need your help spreading that message and then creating the opportunities that actually give people the chance to serve in their community.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So I want to open it up for questions. If folks have questions they want to ask, there are some cards that you can write your question on and hand it up if you don't want to raise your hand and ask, or feel free to just raise your hand and ask. Yes?
Yes. We are very related. So AmeriCorps programs run through our office. And so AmeriCorps is a program that has existed for about 30 years. We're actually celebrating the 30-year anniversary this year. It's a federally funded program. And so the much of the money flows through our office, and then we grant out to people around the state. And so these other programs that I've talked about, a couple of them are in partnership with AmeriCorps, and a couple of them are completely separate from AmeriCorps. Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to ask, are you familiar with Reach University and their model in engaging in underserved communities within the college and offering teaching credentials to underserved communities at the local level as well? Are you familiar with that model? It's headed by Mallory Dwindle.
I am not, but it sounds like I should be. So thank you.
Hi, so let me look at my note. You, in talking about scaling up, you said you have to show the importance of what you're doing to allies or decision makers in power because there's so much coming at them. And as academics, we tend to be a little too dense to be the one that floats to the top. How do you show that importance in the kind of bite-sized way to communicate with people in power who are making decisions and policies?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One is connected to the proof of concept idea. I think it's really hard to read a piece of paper and then to understand as a human being how that actually plays out in the real world. But I think if you can show and demonstrate what the idea actually looks like with real human beings in communities, to elected officials and to decision makers, that's very powerful. And so that's around the proof of concept. And it doesn't need to be big. You could show it with a few people, and then you can continue to scale as we've done from there. It's why we spend so much time wherever we go in really making sure that elected officials see the work We have representatives here today from our local legislative offices, so they, to learn about and understand the work side. That's, I think that's one idea. And then I think this is, the crass, I think the crass reality is you have to find someone who's going to, or a group of people who are going to champion the idea. And the question is, who's going to champion the idea? And every now and then, your champion might be a legislative policy director who just gets it. Often the champion looks like an organized group, like Organized Labor or Planned Parenthood, a group that has, that organizes around advocacy efforts politically. And so I think that the idea of having your idea to how does it get floated up is to really think about who are going to be the champions for the idea, and how do you get them on board so that it's not just you, or in my case, it wasn't just me advocating for what we were doing, but you had other people sort of creating a surround sound. Yeah.
I was just curious if when you talk about scaling the program federally, but even from state to state, have you had inquiries or people asking questions from other states about replicating this in other places at the state level?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. So when we launched Climate Corps, which is the country's first statewide climate corps to really mobilize Californians around climate action, in the press release, the governor said his hope was to create a model for scaling and mobilizing climate action, not just for our country, but for the planet. And so we're very proud of the fact that just recently, last a couple months, 5 other states have launched their own state-level climate corps that we helped them launch. And then in the fall, some of you may have seen, President Biden announced the creation of the American Climate Corps, which is based off of our model here in California. So we're starting to see the climate corps idea spread. In addition to our College Corps program, a couple weeks ago, the governor of New York at her State of the State put out a release, and honestly, maybe some of you have seen this. I've never seen another governor do this, but it put out a press release that said we're going to create the Empire State Corps based off of the California College Corps model. So for another governor to give credit in a press release is just remarkable. And then the governor of Minnesota has put money in his budget to create the Minnesota College Corps based off of the California College Corps. And so I think it demonstrates a couple things. One is that there's power to this idea. That leaders like President Biden and the governor of New York and the governor of Minnesota understand. And the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, ran on the idea of service. He's a fellow veteran, and service was the crux of his campaign. Pete Buttigieg, who I've known since we were in the Navy, ran for president as a champion for national service. So this idea has power, but I also think it goes back to a theme that I hope is coming across, which is the proof of concept. California is the proof of concept on this. And we're demonstrating that, and we're seeing it spread, and it's very exciting. And then we just have to keep getting better at it here, keep working on the model, and keep coming up with new ideas that continue to spread across the country. Yeah, awesome question. You're already thinking, which is that's what we need people to do, honestly. That we need you, tell me your name? Annie. We need more Annies who are going to bug their local government about creating service and volunteer opportunities. So, to answer your question, we are testing it now with nonprofits. So we are currently funding nonprofits who are doing neighborhood work. So we're learning right now. Our idea is to really launch this. I'm giving away the punchline live here. You first to know. In the summer, the broader effort across working with mayors, local governments, but also neighborhood groups and nonprofits to build. And our hope is that really with this program, what we're trying to tackle is not just the idea that we need to create resilient communities that are ready for floods and fires and taking climate action together, but we have and I think all of us feel this, we have a crisis of connection in our society. And it leads to a crisis of trust, which erodes democracy, and then makes it impossible for us to solve all these bigger issues. And so the question is, how do we start to rebuild that connection? How do we really start to weave that fabric together? And our hope is what we can learn is by simply connecting people to their neighbors as a way to start, can start to deal with the isolation that so many of us feel, the anxiety, the loneliness that the Surgeon General just declared as a public health crisis and epidemic in our country. And so our hope is that by working through local governments, by working through nonprofits, and by Annie and all of her friends getting other cities to do the same, that we're going to be able to engage 40 million neighbors to get to know each other again.
Ooh, one second, I'm going to bring the mic to you so that.
Thanks, Josh. You spoke a little bit about how folks who are in the College Corps, who are doing the teaching, for example, go on to pursue this as a lifelong passion. I'm curious, what else are you hearing from industry and other businesses about how this is supporting their work? For example, Silicon Valley and other kind of partners like that. Yeah, thank you for that question. What we're hearing is, and there was just a fascinating article in the New York Times written about how, sort of maybe counterintuitively, with AI and where technology is going, that humanity and human skills are actually going to be more important than ever. The ability to communicate, to work in teams. So what we're hearing from major employers, and right now we're piloting a core-to-career program in LA about where you do College Corps or Climate Corps, and then we help you land a job and follow a career of your passion. What we're hearing from employers is that it's these soft skills that are so desperately needed. It's just, you know, and it's not just about showing up on time, but it's about the ability to work in a team, to be flexible, to communicate, to be able to adapt to different situations. And that's exactly what our service members are learning. Those are the skills that they're learning when you have to serve side by side with somebody who comes from a very different background than you, thinks differently, might vote differently than you, but you have to work together around a common cause, a common issue, right? And in that process, learning that's what we're hearing from employers. We're also hearing and seeing, that's on the private side. On the public side, we just are facing a massive shortage that we have to come to grips with here in California. We're facing a teacher shortage we talked about. We're facing a nursing shortage of 36,000 nurses in California. We have the lowest per capita number of police officers since 1991. The League of Cities just put out a report that said the biggest challenge that we have to implementing these very bold climate policies that we're all very proud of here in California and in the country, the biggest challenge we have to actually implementing it, which it turns out at the end of the day is what actually matters, not just the policy, but implementing, is that cities and local governments don't have the personnel, they don't have the people to actually execute these policies, right? So I think what we're learning is we're creating the pipeline. We're creating the farm team. We're inspiring people to want to go into public service, because once you've been exposed to it and you feel what the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu called the joy of serving others, once you experience that, you never want to go back. And so that's what we're seeing is the value of these service programs and the pipeline we're created. And then we're seeing the need on both the private and the public sector for these skills.
Any more questions?
So I want to say thank you. You talked a lot about kind of the need for connection and the loneliness that we feel, and I think that's so real, and we see that all around us. And I think the other piece that we see is this sort of cynicism about politics and policy and government, and I am just spectacularly inspired by the way you talk about service and the vision that you have for California and for the globe. Yay, Global Climate Corps. Nobody's going to say you don't think big. And I think that's this sort of ability to imagine the possibilities, the possible future, and a better world keeps me from getting cynical. And so I so appreciate all the work you're doing. And I hope everyone will join me in thanking Josh, not just for being here today, but for all of the work that you do on behalf of California.
Thank you, thank you. And most importantly, go Bears.
Thank you. That was incredible.
All right. We're good. Thank you, team. Fun.